The Young and the Restless spoilers full next to week February 16th to February 27th, 2026. The week ahead in Genoa City unfurls like the tightening of a storm front, a slow but relentless shift in the atmosphere that promises emotional upheaval, moral reckoning, and the unraveling of loyalties that once felt unbreakable. There is a certain electricity to the air, the kind that precedes moments when characters are forced to face not only the consequences of their actions, but the hidden vulnerabilities that led them there. The emotional spine of this unfolding drama rests on Mariah Copeland, a woman whose good intentions have collapsed beneath the crushing weight of her unresolved grief, desperation, and impaired judgment. The moment the news broke that she had attempted to flee the country with Dominic Newman Abbott as chancellor, the shock rippled outward through the community. And now the repercussions arrive with a gravity no one is prepared to fully absorb. Mariah's arrest was swift, almost brutally so, as if the universe itself had grown impatient with her spiral into chaos. She was apprehended before she could disappear across any border, intercepted mere hours before she might have vanished with the child she convinced herself she was protecting. The arrest brought with it a sense of tragic inevitability. It was as though every step Mariah had taken in recent months had led her toward this precipice. This moment when she would be forced to confront the magnitude of what she had done. As she is escorted by Detective Burrow and Sharon Newman to the local police station, there is a heavy tension surrounding her, a mixture of shame, panic, and a surreal detachment. As though she cannot fully process the destruction now swallowing her life. Sharon walks beside her with an expression carved from sorrow and conflicted maternal instinct. She knows how fragile Mariah has been, how haunted she was by past traumas, and how easily unresolved emotional wounds can twist themselves into misguided acts. Yet Sharon also knows that love does not erase accountability, and as she assists in escorting Mariah through the station doors, she feels both protective and powerless. Torn between being a mother and being a witness to justice unfolding. Dominic has been safely reunited with his parents, a reunion filled with relief, but muted by an undercurrent of confusion. The child, young enough to be shielded from the cognitive weight of the ordeal, does not understand that he was kidnapped. In his innocent mind, Mariah's familiar presence felt safe, not threatening, which makes the revelation all the more devastating for those who love him. Abby Winters and Devin Winters cling to the knowledge that Dominic was physically unharmed, yet emotional safety is not the only concern lingering over their minds. Trauma does not always announce itself immediately. Sometimes it germinates quietly in the subconscious until the right or wrong moment coaxes it to the surface. For now, Dominic's cheerful obliviousness comforts them, but both know that healing will require more than the return of a child. Healing will require confronting what Mariah did, why she did it, and how they themselves will respond to the shattered trust that now lies between them. Mariah's transfer back to Genoa City for her arraignment marks the beginning of a long and painful journey. While she sits in the back of the transport vehicle, staring at the blurred motion of passing scenery, her mind oscillates between regret and defensiveness. A part of her still clings to the belief that she acted out of love, that some fractured maternal imprint had convinced her Dominic was in danger, that she alone could keep him safe. But as the scent of the police vehicle's vinyl interior envelops her and the cuffs press coldly into her wrists, reality seeps into the cracks of her denial. She has crossed a legal and moral line, one she may not easily return from. For Mariah, who has spent much of her life fighting to redefine herself, to escape the shadows of manipulation and abandonment, this new fall from grace is especially cruel. She had strived to become someone trustworthy, someone reliable, someone whole. Yet now she faces a future where others see her not as a survivor, but as a perpetrator of harm. For Devin Winters, the emotional weight of the moment extends far beyond mere anger. He has known trauma intimately, has lived through loss and instability, and has always tried to create a sense of safety for those he loves, something he desperately wants for Dominic. Learning that Mariah kidnapped the child rattles him in a way few events have, because it threatens that foundational sense of security he painstakingly worked to establish. He knows Mariah's intentions were not malicious. He knows her heart has always been vulnerable in ways that make her prone to emotional missteps. Yet intention does not erase impact, and the impact of losing Dominic, even briefly, is something he cannot easily forgive. He struggles to reconcile his empathy with his responsibility. Part of him aches for Mariah and the fragility that led her to this moment. Another part of him recoils, fiercely protective of Dominic. determined to ensure that such a breach of trust never happens again. Abby, meanwhile, experiences a different kind of devastation. Her relationship with Mariah was always layered with complicated affection and an unspoken gratitude for the woman who carried Dominic into the world. Abby had trusted Mariah, perhaps more deeply than she realized. To discover that Mariah betrayed that trust so profoundly shakes Abby to her core. It cracks open insecurities about motherhood, worthiness, and her ability to protect her child from the unexpected betrayals of those she once considered family. She wrestles with questions she cannot speak aloud. How does one forgive something like this? Should one even try? And if forgiveness is possible, what form could it take? Abby is not driven by vengeance, but by a fierce, almost primal instinct to guard her child. And yet, she also carries within her a well of compassion that makes the situation even murkier. She knows Mariah's heart is complicated. She knows her past has carved scars that never fully healed. But compassion does not negate fear, and Abby now stands suspended between the two, searching for equilibrium in a world that suddenly feels unstable. Tessa Porter finds herself in one of the cruelest positions of all. Caught between her love for Mariah and her deepening connection with Daniel Romalotti Jr., she is thrust into a moral dilemma that threatens to tear apart the careful balance she has built in her life. Tessa has always been someone who values emotional honesty, yet now she finds herself locked in a silent battle between loyalty and self-preservation. She knows Mariah's actions were born from pain, but she also understands that supporting Mariah unconditionally could jeopardize her own stability, her professional aspirations, and her relationship with Daniel. Daniel offers her a sense of grounding, a safety rooted in mutual respect and emotional maturity. With him, she feels seen and supported. With Mariah, she feels responsible, needed, and tangled in a history both beautiful and suffocating. The moment news of Mariah's arrest reached her, Tessa felt something inside her shift, a fracture she had been avoiding finally forcing itself into the open. Now she must choose whether to follow her heart into the storm of Mariah's consequences or protect herself by stepping back, even if doing so feels like a betrayal. The town of Genoa City watches the unfolding drama with the kind of quiet intensity that soap opera communities often embody. Residents whisper theories, offer unsolicited advice, and draw sharp lines between empathy and judgment. Some see Mariah as a broken woman who succumbed to the traumatic echoes of her past. Others see her as a danger, someone who must be held accountable before her instability harms anyone else. The moral lines in Genoa City have always been flexible, bending to the weight of circumstance, history, and relationships. Yet this particular situation feels different because it touches a child, a figure of innocence, and forces everyone to confront their own biases about what constitutes forgiveness, justice, and redemption. As Mariah is processed at the police station, her fingerprinting and booking unfold with procedural coldness, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos swirling inside her. Sharon remains nearby, never interfering with the officer's work, but offering a silent anchor, a presence that reminds Mariah that she is still loved even as consequences descend. Sharon's heart breaks as she watches her daughter in this position, yet she knows that shielding Mariah from accountability would be its own cruelty. Growth often emerges from pain, and Sharon hopes this moment, harsh as it is, might eventually become a turning point rather than a breaking point. What lies ahead for Mariah is uncertain. The arraignment will determine the official charges, and the legal battle that follows will shape her future for years to come. But the emotional consequences, the strain on her relationships, the damage to her sense of self, the fractures in the family she once felt connected to, those consequences will linger far longer than any courtroom verdict. Devin and Abby must now navigate not only their feelings about Mariah, but also their fears about Dominic's long-term emotional well-being. They must decide whether forgiveness is a path they can walk or whether protecting their son requires drawing boundaries they never anticipated. And then there is Tessa, whose struggle may define the next chapter of the story. Her choice between Mariah and Daniel is not simply a romantic dilemma. It is a question of identity, loyalty, and emotional endurance. To choose Mariah means embracing the chaos of someone who desperately needs support but may not be ready to receive it in a healthy way. To choose Daniel means prioritizing stability, but at the potential cost of abandoning someone who once saved her in her own darkest moments. The weight of that decision settles heavily on her shoulders as she watches her world shift under her feet. In the end, the drama unfolding this week does not merely revolve around crime and punishment, it revolves around the fragile, resilient, troubled ties that bind people together. It exposes the hidden fractures that trauma can carve into relationships, the difficult truth that love alone cannot prevent catastrophe, and the uncomfortable possibility that forgiveness, even when offered, may not always be enough. Genoa City thrives on moral ambiguity, on the tangled complexity of human emotion, and in this moment, the town finds itself embroiled in a story that echoes a truth many wish they could ignore. Sometimes the people we try hardest to save are the ones who hurt us the most, and sometimes redemption demands a price no one is prepared to pay. The tension in Genoa City seemed to thicken with every passing hour, as if the entire town were holding its breath in anticipation of the emotional storms gathering on multiple fronts. Among the most troubling was the downward spiral of Nick Newman, a man who had weathered more crises than most, yet now found himself standing at the edge of a private battle no one could fight for him. His decision to lean on painkillers first as relief, then as escape unfolded quietly, almost imperceptibly, until the habit began to weave itself into his daily rhythms with a subtle but sinister grip. Victoria had seen the warning signs before anyone else. She recognized the distant look in his eyes, the way he brushed off concerns with impatience, the uneasy shifts in his demeanor that pointed to a struggle he refused to acknowledge. Her warning had not been accusatory, but weighted with fear, born from years of witnessing addiction destroy the strongest of people. Yet Nick, blinded by stress and unwilling to view himself as vulnerable, dismissed her concerns. He told himself he was in control, that he knew his limits, that he was merely coping with pressure the way anyone would. But the pills had become an anchor around his spirit, dragging him deeper into waters he could no longer navigate. Sharon's discovery confirmed what Victoria had feared. When she noticed the small object Nick hid in his pocket, it was not suspicion that jolted through her, but heartbreak. She had stood beside him through triumphs and tragedies, through reinvention and relapse, through every reshaping of his identity across the years. She knew what it looked like when he began slipping away from himself. She recognized the avoidance, the too quick explanations, the careful concealment of something he was ashamed to admit. As she watched him hide the medication, a quiet dread spread through her chest. This was not merely a mistake, it was a doorway into a battle that could consume him if he continued to deny its presence. The pills represented more than physical relief, they were becoming a refuge from emotional burdens he refused to confront. Sharon understood that pattern all too well, and the knowledge that Nick might be headed toward addiction carved a painful crease into her resolve. She wanted to help him, but help could only reach someone willing to be saved. Yet even as the Newman family braced for an unfolding crisis, the town was thrust into a far darker narrative with the sudden disappearance of Lily Winters. What was initially thought to be a staged kidnapping intended as a manipulative tactic quickly transformed into a chillingly real threat. Somewhere in the blurred transition between deception and danger, Lily vanished completely from the lines of communication, her whereabouts slipping into the void. The transformation of the fake kidnapping into an actual abduction sent shock waves through Genoa City. Not only because of Lily's vulnerability, but because the consequences radiated outward to the people who mattered most to her. Maddie and Charlie, once shielded by familiarity and structure, found themselves unexpectedly endangered. Pulled into the gravitational force of a situation spiraling far beyond anything they could have anticipated. Their mother's disappearance became a specter hanging over them, a reminder that even the most carefully constructed lives could unravel in the blink of an eye. The town responded with frantic concern, each new sliver of information only deepening the sense of panic threading through the community. The boundaries between safety and threat, between performance and real peril, blurred so completely that no one could confidently determine where the danger began or where it might end. Lily's absence created a vacuum not just in her family, but in the emotional stability of those connected to her, forcing everyone to confront the unsettling truth that crises rarely remain contained to their initial victims. They seep outward, quietly shifting relationships, altering priorities, exposing vulnerabilities long buried under routine and familiarity. Amid this escalating tension, Jack Abbott stepped into a pivotal role as he derailed one of Billy Abbott's plans before it could fully manifest. Jack's interference was not born from rivalry alone, but from a deepening recognition that Billy's impulsive tendencies were once again propelling him toward a path paved with consequences he would later regret. The dismantling of Billy's scheme was executed with the calm decisiveness that Jack had cultivated over years of navigating corporate war zones and familial conflicts. His decision to intervene was a deliberate attempt to preserve the fragile equilibrium of his family and protect Billy from himself. Yet even Jack understood that in thwarting one plan, he was only delaying the inevitable clash between Billy and the forces internal and external that continuously pulled him toward chaos. Meanwhile, Victoria found herself pursuing a separate, carefully engineered strategy, one she confided only in Nate Hastings. Her plan carried the sharp precision of someone accustomed to wielding power in high-stakes arenas. Victoria had always danced on the line between boldness and ruthlessness, and recent events had only hardened her determination to assert control in a world spiraling unpredictably. Sharing her strategy with Nate signaled a trust that was both empowering and dangerous, creating a bond that blurred professional boundaries and emotional nuance. With Nate as her confidant, Victoria sharpened the edges of her approach and prepared herself to teach Billy a brutal but necessary lesson. The confrontation that followed was not explosive, but chilling in its clarity. Victoria delivered her reality check with unwavering conviction, forcing Billy to confront truths he had avoided for far too long. Her words cut through his defenses with surgical accuracy, leaving him with no choice but to see the consequences of his behavior reflected back at him without distortion. Kane Ashby, sensing the shifting alliances across town, attempted to align himself with Daniel in a move that mixed strategy with desperation. Kane understood that standing alone during tumultuous times was rarely a position of strength, and forging a connection with Daniel could provide both protection and advantage. Yet beneath the surface of this alliance was a complex mixture of ambition and anxiety, as Kane grappled with the reality that his influence had begun to wane. His attempt to form a partnership was both a pragmatic maneuver and a silent admission that the ground beneath him was no longer solid. Daniel, perceptive as always, recognized the opportunity, but also the risks that came with partnering with someone whose motives were shaped as much by fear as by strategy.